Welcome to Rise and Thrive, Conversations for Greatness. We bring you captivating conversations with extraordinary individuals who have conquered challenges, achieved greatness, and are making a positive impact in the world. This is your go-to source for inspiration and motivation. I'm your host, John Merkers. Welcome to the show. I'm very excited to have our guest for today's episode. I've known him for years. I'm thrilled to have him on the show because he's one of the most cheerful, humorous individuals that I've ever encountered. Beyond his infectious positivity and his laughter, he is a veritable treasure trove, try and say that fast, of knowledge and achievement. He's spent an extensive amount of time in the educational system. After graduating from high school, he embarked on an academic journey that included not one, but 6 university degrees. Oh my God, all in a bid to delay entering the real world. Remarkably, he successfully managed to evade the conventional workforce by assuming roles as a university lecturer and eventually rising to the esteemed position of head academic professor. He dedicated a considerable proportion of his life to intensive research and still does, teaching and innovation of cutting-edge marketing strategies. He did so at respected academic institutions such as Monash, Kaplan, and Southern Cross universities. In the same way his idol Michael J. Fox could never resist a challenge after being called a chicken, he couldn't resist an offer to move into the private sector when a friend pointed out the classic adage, those who can do, those who can't teach. In a bold move, 9 years ago, he ventured into the world of marketing and training by founding his own company. His expertise has been instrumental in assisting renowned organisations like Energy Australia, Ferrari, Oliver Hume, Visa, and Cathay Pacific, so we can get energy, get a great car, get into some real estate, put some stuff on our card and fly somewhere. Notably, one of his current clients is a global player in the field of research on LSD microdosing for improvement of mental health conditions. It's my pleasure, everyone, to introduce Matt Cordner, or should I say Professor Matt?
Hey, John? Oh, no, please, no. Matt's fine. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me on.
Thanks for coming on. Well, I have really enjoyed our conversations in the past, so it's great to be able to share some of the things that we talk about with the audience. And one of the things we've spoken about in the past, which I'd really like your take on again, is how you define success and greatness, I was going to say, and success. We'll put them in the same category. And what does that mean to you?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. It's one that you propose that as a part of the podcast, which is great. And I think greatness is actually it's an outcome. It's not a process. It's an outcome. And by that, I think I probably mean that it's by virtue of what you manage to do through the course of your life. And no one, particularly in Australia, calls themselves someone of greatness. We have a very clear tall poppy syndrome in this part of the world, don't we, that doesn't allow you to do that. But I do think it is for others to say, but I think there is an internal aspect to greatness as well, and that is when you feel that you've reached a goal or you feel that you've succeeded in something that you would like to achieve. One of the things, John, I was having a conversation yesterday with somebody about this, and they mentioned the fact that there is this aspect of, as we get older, and you and I aren't spring chickens anymore, but as we get older, there is this expectation that there is a destination that we will arrive at, perhaps in our 70s or 80s, and go, well, I'm here, I've made it. And I think one of the things as we get older, we start to realize is that we never really quite get there, that there's always, whenever we arrive at a position that we want to be at, whether that be having achieved a goal or an age an age of a certain nomination or whatever it is, we suddenly decide that there's somewhere else we want to go or something else we want to achieve. So that idea of ever achieving greatness, I think, for most of us, is an ongoing journey.
I hear what you're saying, and we can. What I'm trying to say is we can be great on the way to greatness. I've mentioned before in an episode where I was always the old do have be. So I was of the opinion I had to do something to have something to be able to be something, and then I realised I could be that straight away without having to wait.
Yes. Yeah, it's interesting. One of the questions that I've been grappling with recently is when you meet somebody for the first time, they'll often say, "Oh, what do you do?" And I think how you answer that question is really interesting. What do you do? Do you define what you do by the job that you hold, or do you define it by the way that you affect other people and the way that you commit yourself to your goals, or the way that you try to be a source of joy and influence for other people? What is it that you do? What do you want to be known for? But so many of us default to giving a job title, don't we?
Yeah, that's right, and it's a really important point that you make. We're more than the job we do or the work we do. If you're lucky, you can be doing something that you love, which is great, but that's not always available to people. And there's ways to take steps to achieve that. But I really take your point about we list our job title.
We do, and I'm not sure that all parts of the world do that, but certainly in the industrialized world, that's very, very common and very key. And I wonder if it's time to start rethinking that, because one of the things that we certainly teach as a part of the educational systems that we do is that you actually can no longer separate the you of work and the you at home.
Definitely.
Particularly around values. And the values that you have at home have to be the values that you have at work. And if they don't, if there is a clash around that, you're really not working at your optimum.
Right. That makes sense because, some people, we've all worn different masks depending on where we're at, but essentially you're the same human being walking into that environment.
Yeah.
I hear you. Now, I'd be quite happy to be meeting you at a party because you're a great storyteller, and you have you've explained to me about the power of storytelling, whether it's in a personal or a professional setting. And I just wonder if you could say more about that. Why is that important? And how would some of our audience, maybe some of the things they can think about to have more of that in their lives?
Yeah. I have a mantra that all marketing is education and all education is story. And by that, I mean that the way to market products and services is not so much to tell people how great your product is, but to give them a piece of knowledge they didn't have prior to coming across you or your product or your service. So a lot of the focus of the marketing that we do is around educating people and giving people our best information for free. And that allows us to then to give people the tools that they need to do whatever they want to do in a marketing sense for themselves, or come and talk to us. And the second part of that is what you're talking about, which is that all education is story. And when I talk about that, when I mean we're talking principally about stories, I've actually discovered that from being a lecturer. So when I have to go and stand in front of a room of 200 people on a Friday afternoon, all of which don't want to be there and would rather be anywhere else on a Friday afternoon at the end of the week and want to get out, I find that really the best way to give a piece of information that will stick is to tell it in a story. And I spend a lot of time turning valuable information into stories, to storify information to get people to remember it. And the reality of that is that that's exactly how we remember things. We are geared as humans to be interested in each other, and to lean in to hear the end of a story. And if that story contains some valuable nuggets of information, then people are going to remember that. They'll remember the story more than they'll actually remember the nuggets, but within the story are those nuggets, and that's the gold that they will find.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense, especially when you think of bless you, especially when you look at how Indigenous people in years gone by would share knowledge with stories.
Yeah, and that's right. And again, that's how that storified history has survived,
Right.
through the continuous storytelling. And and I think there's an element of entertainment. We all like to be entertained, and the best way to learn is to be entertained while you're learning.
You told me a story once before, and to be honest, I've forgotten the actual moral of the story. But one thing I've remembered, though,
Yeah.
was that you were working in a pub with your dad or a restaurant or something like that. And I remember it did have a gold nugget in there. And I'm glad I got you back so I can say, can you tell me what that, and for our audience as well, what that is again?
No, I think well, they're actually my parents, when I was 14, owned a motel with a licensed restaurant. It was one of only 2 licensed restaurants in the township, and there's a couple of stories from this actually. So I need to be sure I tell the right one. There's a couple of ones. There's a couple of ones that are just funny because some rather bizarre things happened. But whether there's a moral or not, I guess that's up to the to the listener. But I think one of the ones that I often tell is about the fact that my father was a particularly funny person, and he thought that it would be funny if the sommelier of the restaurant was me, a 14-year-old who'd never had a drink in his life. and he really just wanted to give me one of the hardest tasks, which is to keep up to date with reordering of wines that we ran out of, because it had quite an extensive wine menu. And so that was part of my job. I would go in, count the bottles, and fill in the forms and reorder from various different wineries around the region. And
at 14,
so I was, it's a bit hard to believe, but I was the sort of kid who just wouldn't break the rules, because that was just, my parents would annihilate me. So the only way to judge a good wine for me was by its label. So I would inevitably recommend and order wines that had fabulous labels. And what happened was, I decided when one day Brown Brothers, who's of course a very good Victorian winery, decided that they would change their labels, and they moved from a very nice gold and silver, which I thought was a very regal nice, but to a very quirky sort of colourful. To me, it lost its elegance, and so I decided to stop having Brown Brothers as our house wine, which of course was huge, because we sold a lot of house wine, because that's the way it worked. And this sent Brown Brothers dispatching their finest winemaker to come and meet this sommelier and ask the question as to why they had changed the house wine, and that the ordering just wasn't there. So he arrived at the reception of the establishment, and I happened to be standing in the reception with Dad, and he said, "Well, I need to speak to the person who's ordering the wine." And Dad thought this was very funny, and he just simply pointed to me. And And he looked at me, and he looked back at my dad, and he said, "Him?" And Dad said, "Yeah, that's him." And he looked at me and he said, Why have you stopped having us as the, we're up the road, we've had this partnership for so long. Why have you suddenly decided to make us no longer be the house wine?" And I said, "Because you changed the label. I don't like it." And he said, "What? Have you ever tried this wine?" I said, "Oh God, no! I'm only 14." and and he looked at Dad, and Dad was quite adamant that these were my decisions, not his. And he left. So there's a number of morals from that story. One is you never judge a book by its label, right? But also I think there's an aspect of there's a marketing message in that when you make changes like that, and I'm sure Brown Brothers did, but you need to make sure that you're looking after your demographic. I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you, Budweiser. And you have an understanding of your customer, and also never underestimate a 14-year-old. They can often be the genius in the room.
I forgot it was about the changing of the label. So when you mentioned that, it struck a chord with me again. What an interesting position to be put in as a 14-year-old, to be managing that. And then what a great sense of humour your dad had to say, well, that's the man here, and he's the one doing the job. Fantastic. And bit of pressure, but it sounds like you did what you normally do and did it with a smile and got into it. So it leads me to ask you, how do you stay motivated in those times where we all have challenges, and I'm going to talk about mindset with you shortly. But before I do, what do you do and what you think to stay motivated, and maybe especially in those challenging times?
Yeah, we do a lot of study on resilience, and Sharpen actually trains in resilience. Look, John, I've got our book. But I guess the answer to that question is resilience, and how to define what being resilient is, and what resilient people do. I think for me, the first mental position I always take is that there's no such thing as a problem that can't be solved. And I approach every single issue with that expectation.
Now, I might butt in every now and then, sorry, because when I hear something like that, I really need to kind of either expand on that or acknowledge you. What a great mindset. There is no problem that can't be solved. So you are operating in your life with that intention, with that playing. That's amazing. I love that. I'm going to take that on. There's no problem that can't be solved. Sometimes I say a problem shared is a problem halved, but I also like popping in there, well, there's no problem that can't be solved. Great. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. And look, I the way in which you solve it is, for me, part of the journey. And I always take an academic approach to these things. I research possible solutions, and I choose one. It's as simple as that. And if that solution doesn't work, then I try the other one and the other one. And if the solving of the problem is to ignore the problem or to move away from it, then that's still a solution. So I do, and particularly with my children and my family, we just simply say, okay, this is a problem. So what are the options? Which one are we going to choose? Let's enact that and expect that will solve it. So I think there's a lot of time wasted in disasterphizing, and I know there's no such word as that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I think your ability to regulate that. So for example, the three things that resilient people have. The number one thing is actually an expectation that things will go wrong.
That people that aren't resilient.
No.
Have,
People
okay.
that are resilient.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad I clarified that. So if you're
Yeah.
resilient, you've got an understanding that things will go wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
You have to have an understanding that, and you can never workshop the problem unless you are aware that they will come, and your first reaction is not to throw your arms up in the air or worse. Your first reaction is, okay, well, problems come and here's one. So that's the most important thing. The second thing that resilient people do is change their focus. And I really want to deep dive into this one with you, because the focus that you select for yourself has a direct correlation to the way that you feel and your response and your emotions. And if you regulate and be much more deliberate about where your focus is, you can actually be extremely resilient. And I think the first thing to say about resilience is that you don't have to. Resilience is not something that happens as a disaster once in a lifetime. Resilience is a fork in the road that happens every day. And I think we do tend to get trapped in that idea that unless I've had a major disaster in my life, I can't test my resilience, or I'm not resilient, or I don't know. And I think all of those are wrong, because resilience happens to us every day. There are small things that when we drop a glass on the floor and we get upset about the glass everywhere, or do we just simply go, okay, well, that's happened. What do I need to do? There's a problem to be solved. I need to get the vacuum. I need to be careful I don't step on it, etc., etc. And I think those sorts of, that focus is really, really important.
And so when you say that focus, you mean focusing on getting through the situation, or focusing on what kind of things do I need to be saying to myself to rise above this? What do you mean when you say the focus?
Yeah. So there are two aspects to focus. There's the focus that you put when something happens. Let's not call it a disaster. Let's just call it an event. And there's the focus that you have as a general human being. And when your focus is skewed towards negativity, and the singularity happens, such as the glass breaking, you've already geared yourself to take a negative attitude towards that process.
Right.
So one of the things, let me give you a really practical example. When I was younger, I used to be a big consumer of talkback radio. And the problem with talkback radio is that it is always negative. Generally speaking, it's about what's wrong with the world. And tomorrow there's a whole set of 10 new things that are wrong with the world, and the next day and the next day. And I made a conscious decision to cut that out of my life, to refocus around that. And what I found was that I was quite used to having something going on in the background. So I switched it to two things: to music while I work, but also to sports radio, because it's always positive. With the occasional people who perhaps aren't. But generally speaking, you can't go wrong with listening to people talking about sport or listening to music, unless your focus is on music that is specifically designed to be miserable or hateful even.
Right. Well, I'm glad you mentioned about the music, as that reminds me to ask you. I've got a Spotify playlist called Mirko Motivation, and I ask all my guests, what's a song? It doesn't have to be the song, but it could be the song. What's your song that you would put on when you want to invoke that feeling of, let's get things done. I'm motivated to do this. What would the song?
So let me take a step back and give you a song for when I need to solve a problem, to get out of a crisis. I have a favourite song from Alanis Morissette, who if there's anyone who's going to kick a door in, it's Alanis.
I'm scared of her, and I've never met her.
And the name of the song is actually the mantra that I love, which is "The only way out is through."
Right.
And I love that because often in life, when you've got to face something that perhaps you're nervous about or don't even want to face, we spend a lot of time trying to avoid it, and it happens anyway. But I think if you face it with that thinking that, well, actually, the only way out of this is to damn well go through it, to just plow into it, get it done, and how magnificent it's going to be when I come out the other end and I've fixed it, or I've done what I had to do, and now I'm getting on with the rest of my life. And that's important in so many areas. And that song just solidifies, the way she sings it solidifies that for me.
Great. That's going on the Mirko Motivation playlist. So you said you had two, so that was one?
Oh, no, I think what I meant was two types of situations. So that's for a situation when I need to get through an issue. You specifically asked me about the sort of music that I might put on if I need motivation. There's so many that having grown up in the 70s and 80s, there's some rather embarrassing music that we all have to admit to. But I think I'm going to make a confession for you here. I'm actually I'm actually a Swiftie. Dads can be Swifties as well. I'm a Taylor Swift fan, and I think there's a number of songs that she has, which I think are not the songs about her own relationships, but particularly the songs around the Evermore album and the Fearless album. Really great to just put on and listen to the whole set, and particularly pay attention. I'm a lyric attention focuser, not just the music. And the music is important, but I love I love live theatre. I love prose. I love all of that. So what's actually written within the song is just as important for me.
Nice. I get you like live theatre, but what's with the prose?
I was a big fan of Shakespeare, and in my earlier youth days, I directed a number of Shakespeare plays.
Oh, nice!
Yeah,
that's showing my lack of education because I don't know what a pro is.
That's Sorry, you.
I thought it had another particular meaning, which I knew you didn't mean, but I didn't. So prose is that like a Shakespeare piece?
Prose is anything, literature, poems, sonnets, plays. Right. Yeah.
Well, this is well, I love learning, and that's part of the reason we have these discussions on the show. And,
I'm not going to be able to stop now.
And I know you're very well read and obviously very educated and academic, so it's no surprise there. Now, look, you marketing. I know you don't hate this term, but you're a marketing guru. You are a super dad, super husband. You're juggling a lot of things in your life. You've got a great attitude towards life. I did, and you touched on it ever so briefly, or you mentioned your kids. I'm really interested in, there's a lot of parents listening, and they might find that their kids have taught them things as well, if not patience, and they might not have taught you patience, but they will certainly test them. But is there anything that your kids have taught you in terms of being great, or how to be great, or in that kind of area?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think the answer comes from a step back too, because often the way we parent is the way that we were parented, and we either reflect on that and adopt it, or we reflect on that and resist it. So yeah, I think. And I think as the children grow, your parenting style obviously needs to adapt, and it changes. And I'm in the situation now where I basically have adults. I'm living with adults who don't pay rent, and that situation I think is really interesting because one of the things that my children are very good at is debating and arguing, as all of our children are, and I think one of the things that I'm probably 50% more calmer than I used to be, probably as a result of them, because they have a much more chilled attitude, believe it or not, than I did. And I think coming to that journey and allowing them to be heard and hear their side of the story is really important. And it actually reduces the number of arguments that you have, because I think for most people, we just want to be heard, don't we? Really,
Yeah.
we and we're happy for people to not accept or even disagree with what we say, but we want to be heard. And I think that active listening is really important.
Yeah, it's good you mentioned that, and that's something specifically that I'm going through today with my daughter. So it's really nice to hear you say that, because that's going to make a difference to me when I next interact with her when she gets home from school. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And you've helped me in terms of marketing principles, and there's some questions that you've asked me in the past when I've wanted to do something personally or professionally, and they're really powerful questions. And I might not put them in the same way that you will, so that's why I'm going to ask you to put them in the better way. But you've asked me things like, what are you actually trying to achieve? What's the problem that you're trying to solve for people? And these kind of questions. Can you talk a little bit more about that? And I ask that kind of question because I think we've probably got some aspiring entrepreneurs and professionals looking to use marketing as a tool to achieve their personal and business and or business goals. And sometimes we overcomplicate things as adults, but those questions that you've asked me have I found to be really simple. But the thing was, I wasn't asking myself those questions.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Look, I think. Yeah, thank you. One of the key things about marketing is that it changes so frequently, and it changes according to generations. And we have a number in marketing. We think of generations as every 7 years, and we divide accordingly. So mostly people think about X Gen, Y Gen, baby boomers, and millennials. But in marketing, we think much more fractured than that in terms of approximately 7 years. And each of those age groups need to be marketed to differently. But all of them have one thing in common, and that is that we call it in marketing the desired outcome, or I call it the desired outcome. And by that I mean, what do you want your customer to be doing after they've used your product or service? Um, and
That's a great question in itself. So simple. It's like, what do you want your customer or the person you're trying to impact? What do you want them doing after they've used your product or service? Great.
So the great example of a really good example of that is some of our banking, and I'm not a great fan of the way that banks advertise, because you can see through it, but it adheres to the principle, and the principle is that let's have advertising that shows you enjoying swimming in your backyard with the barbecue going and your friends around. Let's not talk about the product and whether or not what the interest rate will be, or whether or not you have a get out clause, and all of those sorts of things that your product might be fabulous at doing. It is often a complete waste of your advertising budget if you cut straight to the chase and say, this is how you will feel, act, the tools and the abilities that you have after you've used or come across our products and services. So that desired state of the customer is really important. Sell the dream, I think, is probably the best way to put that. And often what your products have, no matter how much time you spend on them, people actually don't care. They just want the desired product. The other question I often ask is, what problem are you trying to solve? because all marketing, to my mind, falls into two categories. You're either a medicine or a vitamin, and by that I mean you are either solving a problem. Somebody's got an ill or an illness, not literally, but they've got something they want fixed, and your product fixes it. That
Mm.
makes you a medicine. A vitamin product is a product that somebody's doing something already, but if they used your product, they would do it so much quicker or so much better or so much easier than how they're currently doing it. So I think if you think about which one of those two categories your product or service falls into, you have much better clarity about the sorts of people who might buy your product. And after all, establishing your target market is key. And so many people get that wrong. So yeah, so those two sections, I'm really keen for people to think very hard about. What is the desired result of the customer, and what category does my product or service fall into?
Great, really, yeah, really good advice. I love that too. The medicine and the vitamin. That's nice and easy to remember as well. And once those questions are answered, then you've got a context to operate in. And I've heard the saying before: the context is decisive. So the context you're operating in propels you forward and allows you to make the decisions and take the actions that you need to take based on the context you're operating out of. So it's a couple of great questions to really work that out.
Yeah.
I remember talking to you once and you said to me, everything I've done has been successful and I've got no reason to think this won't be either. And I thought that self belief was really inspiring, and that mindset and that thinking. So, can you talk a bit more about that? Because I think you've got to generate that, or or
Yeah.
you've decided that's how you're going to be. So, how is it that you are like that and you have that self belief?
So I think it needs to be real. I meet a lot of people who you say, "How are you?" and they'll say, "I'm fantastic," and you just know there's an edge of that is forced deliberately. It's not to say that for everybody, but for often people are. And there are two things that I think you need to um, you need to really draw in. And John, up front, I'm a strong believer in the law of attraction. I believe that what you what you think you materialize,
Mm,
um, and I believe that because when you walk into a room and you walk into a room with the expectation that things will go well and that we'll all succeed, then you bring that energy into the room. If you walk
mm,
in, particularly as a leader, if you walk in with the opposite energy, then people very quickly and easily fall into that energy void that you've created.
mm,
So if it's not false and you genuinely believe that you have the ability to make things work, and
mm,
you also back that up with there's no problem that can't be solved,
mm,
then you by rights can walk into a room and say, the expectation is that we'll get this done and this will be successful. The other aspect of that for me is there can't be any room in my thinking for failure, because as soon as failure comes in, doubts come in.
mm.
And that's not to say that you don't fail, but then that doesn't become a failure. That just becomes another problem that needs to be solved.
Right.
That's all. There is no failure. There's just problems that need to be solved.
Mm, mm,
So I think if you come in expecting for things to go well and for you to back your own brain to come up with a solution to any problem, then I think that is infectious, and it's certainly been very successful for me.
mm. Yeah, I can see, and it's infectious as well, which I like. It reminded me when you were talking there that it's not a failure. I like the mindset of, oh, yeah, that's just another problem I need to solve. Or as Tony Robbins would say, well, I produced a result. It might not be the result I wanted, so I'll take some other actions and produce a different result. It's a great
Yeah,
reframing
yeah,
to empower.
yeah. And I'm a huge believer in energy, and I believe that when your energy is up and motivated and expecting success, then success will be attracted to you like a magnet. And
Mm.
there's nothing mythical about that. It's not like we don't need to
Mm.
invoke Harry Potter around that. There's actually studies that will show that is just simply the case. That
Mm.
if as a leader you infect the room, or you give the vibe, the energy that we will succeed here,
Mm. Mm.
there's a much higher chance that we will. And if we don't, as I said before, it just becomes another problem we solve. But if we start to get to the point where we say, well, that's it, this is happening again to me, here I go again, I can't even find a car park, what sort of a day am I going to have? Whereas if you get in the car and you go, right, today's going to go well, I'm going to get every green light, and I'm going to get a fabulous car park right at the front, and there'll probably be a bargain waiting for me for the product that I really want, then I think that to begin with, you started your day much better. And it just reminds me about one of the causational scientific effects with resilience to mention to you, and that is gratitude. And this is not hocus pocus at all, it's complete scientifically backed, that when you focus, and we talked about focus earlier, when you focus on being grateful for the things that are fantastic in your life,
Mm.
then you actually put yourself in a mindset that makes you more resilient and actually wards off depression. People say that it can be easy to say that, but it's about building that resilience,
Mm.
and you do that every day. Every day you can get up and you can write, if that's what you do, 5 things that you're grateful for. Or you can just
Mm.
simply, while you're sitting on the train going to work, think about the 5 things that you're really grateful for. And already your mindset is where it needs to be
Mm.
to bring in more things to be grateful for.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, Matt. And it is something simple that we can do on a daily basis. It doesn't take a lot of time or effort. I also do it in the evenings because I've heard it programs your subconscious as well. So as I put my head on the pillow, I think of 3 to 5 things that I'm grateful for that day, and it doesn't have to be massive, major things. It could be, I'm really grateful that I'm in a warm bed tonight,
Yeah.
or that I ate a meal, or that I've got my health so I can actually walk to the kitchen if I need to, and things like that. Because there's people out there that aren't able to do that. Now they can be grateful in other ways as well. That's what I mean. Everyone can be grateful for whatever situation that they're in. But I just feel like sometimes people might think there got to be major things. I'm so grateful that I got this promotion at work and
Yes.
whatnot, and I hope you do, and I hope you did.
Yes.
But they're not regular occurrences. So you don't need to wait. And I love that. And you mentioned there's some studies, and I know you're big on research, and that is so awesome. So they're not just um, opinions that aren't backed by data and stuff like that. So, is there anything you can tell us about the research? Well, I suppose you already have, I know, but is there anything else?
So, one of the biggest researchers into this area, resilience and gratitude, is a study by Gloria and Steinhardt, who are American researchers, 2016. I'll provide you the details if you like. But if you really want to deep dive into that causal relationship between
Mm.
resilience and gratitude,
Mm.
that's a great one. So they talk about gratitude fosters coping mechanisms,
Mm-hmm.
and that's absolutely critical. Another one is McCanley's, Andrews, and Volatani, who are 2018, who I'll give you, if your readers are interested, some cross references for that as well. So there are some really good studies that look at this relationship between gratitude and resilience. And I think one of probably the thing to say about it is that it gives you problem-solving capabilities. It gives you things like forgiveness and empathy, John, are really, really
Mm.
important
Mm.
to being resilient. Um, and why is resilience so important? Because in your daily life and in the workplace, you're going to face problems that need solving, and having the mindset that is so used to being in a position to be able to solve issues and cope with things when they go south is really, really important. And there's one last thing that I want to tell you specifically about resilience, and that
Mm.
is that one of the key things that highly resilient people do is they say to themselves, what I'm doing right now, is it harming or is it helping me? And if it's harming me, stop it.
Mm. Mm.
um, and that can be, if I were to give you some examples of that can be quite often after a funeral, for example. It might be nice to go through some old photographs um, and remember that person. But if those photographs you're still looking through weeks and months later and they're bringing you sadness, you're probably now at a point where that activity is harming you rather than helping you. And that is the point at which you can improve your own resilience and not fading into that depression around loss of a loved one, but by simply saying it's time to put that away.
Mm.
And I think if we, and I can give you an example in the workplace. If you're around the water cooler and you're gossiping about a colleague, is that harming or is that helping you? The
Mm.
chances are it's probably harming you. And
Yep.
um, resilient people are always asking themselves that question: is what I'm doing right now harming or helping me? And if it's harming me, change it up.
Great. I love that question because you can ask yourself that with your thoughts. What I'm thinking now, is that harming or helping? And things that you're doing. What I'm doing right now, is that harming or helping me? I'm upset that I got cut off in traffic and I'm angry. Is that harming or helping me? Well, that's not helping me. So, what a great question to be able to ask yourself to bring you back to a mindset of greatness and positivity just by asking a simple question. I
Yeah,
love it.
and none of these tools that we talk about, John, are helpful unless they can be done quickly and simply. And that's what I've learned being a trainer over many, many years. It's useless giving somebody 20 processes to get to a place,
Mm.
because they'll forget, or they'll get process tired by the time they get there. So the simple aspects of just asking that question and
Mm.
and paying attention to your focus really keenly.
Mm.
Um, are you deep diving into bad stories about mushroom poisoning, or
Mm.
are
Mm.
you
Mm.
really, are
Mm.
you going down rabbit holes of that algorithms are sending you down? And is that harming or helping you? And do
Yep.
you need to change your focus? And when you change your focus to things that are more positive, it's
Mm.
not ignoring what's going on in the world. It's looking after your mental health.
Yeah, and I hear you. One of the things we say on the show is, be careful and mindful of who you're hanging around with, because they can have an influence on your thoughts and actions as well. So I can really hear a bit of that in what you're saying.
Absolutely.
And speaking of resilience, I know, and it's great that you've spoken about some of these really simple things that we can do. Now, I know you've created some training around resilience, and I'd love to hear more about that.
We have, and the I held it up before. I probably didn't hold it up well enough, but um, we our organisation are marketers and trainers, and one of the things that we do is, particularly post pandemic, is there are a number of organisations that don't have the resources that they once had, and the ability to deal with things such as lower budgeting, um, programs that need to be stopped because they can't continue, um, even the terrible event of having to lay off staff, anything that requires you as a manager and as a leader, to have resilience on a daily basis, I think is a gift that can be really useful. So we actually developed this program from demand. It wasn't like we decided that we needed to do this because we had a number of other programs around leadership that we were doing. This has come from demand, and about 2 years ago, I did a deep dive on researching this, and we've come up with this what I think is a really fabulous 6 2-hour sessions that we usually do in person in an organisation, or indeed we can do it online. It's completely up to the person. But it does. What it strikes me, John, is that we tend to do this to a lot of, or for a lot of large organisations, and I think expense is perhaps a barrier to this sort of high level training that can really help an organisation. And I think coupled with that is a need for an incentive for more middle-sized and smaller organisations to take up this sort of training. And I'm really keen to let people in on a couple of secrets, and that is how indeed you can train your staff to be more resilient, but also how you can make sure that there's enough customers coming through the door to make sure that you can pay for that training. So we have. I would like to focus, and my colleagues and partners are going to kill me for this, and I didn't consult them because I knew I'd be told no. But I would like to offer any organisation, particularly those in the middle bracket. So if you have between 10 and 200 employees, because most of the organisations that we deal with have 2,000 plus. So it's a different category. So those organisations that sit in the middle, we'd be very keen if they would like to undertake our Resilience X program, that we would provide, I'm struggling to say it, John, but a month's worth of LinkedIn advertising or LinkedIn marketing for that particular organisation as a part of helping them in the 2 areas that we work in. Now, I think I mentioned to you before that would be up to 10K, which again, I'm going to get smashed for it, but we don't work with a lot of organisations because we just work so in such detail with the organisations that we do, that would be a big commitment from us. But if that can help a couple of organisations that are in those categories, then that would be great for us as well.
I'd love to put your contact details in the show notes so people can contact you directly on that, Matt. It sounds like a great offer and a generous offer. I appreciate you doing that for our audience. And it's called Resilience X, isn't it?
It's called Resilience
X. When you were first talking about it, it sounded like your old training, like the X training. But, is there, apart from it being pretty cool, is there any reason behind the X?
Oh, just because I like the X-Files.
Excellent. The truth is out there.
The truth is out there. Yeah. No, look, I think one of the things to say about this particular training is that it's all deeply based in psychology. So the research, we don't train people things that we think they should know. We make sure that it's all scientifically backed and that everything is a deep dive in research. And part of the research around this is with a very new aspect of what's called positive psychology. So the positive psychology movement started 5 years ago, and the basis is that you expect things to go well, not you expect things to go badly, and then you improve or you try and struggle through that mindset. And positive psychology is probably what a great slice of psychologists are now adopting as the way that they help people, and we think that is just fantastic methodology for teaching resilience.
Thanks, Matt. And Can you leave our audience with a final piece of advice or a mantra that they can carry with them on their own journey towards greatness and being great?
Yeah, I can. I think one of the things about what we've been talking about is um, why why do you need to be resilient? And we talked about the connection between resilience and gratitude. There's actually another connection, and that is resilience and innovation. And I think if you want to be innovative in both your personal life and your working life, you need to take risks. And in order to take risks, you need to expect failure. But in order to be resilient and come back from failure, you need to be grateful, and you need to have the mindset that you can that there are always whatever comes your way, you can deal with it, and whatever comes your way is a problem that can be solved. So, from a working perspective, I encourage you to be innovative. I encourage you to take risks, and I encourage you to expect problems, but I also encourage you to set yourself up in a mindset that will cope with those and go one step further and solve all of those problems as they come.
Thank you. That is great for our audience to hear and an awesome way to finish. I can't thank you enough for being on the show, imparting your words of wisdom. I think we could have so many other topics that we could talk about. Love to have you back on the show another time. And it's really been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, John.
Another incredible episode of Rise and Thrive Conversations for Greatness. I hope this conversation has ignited a fire within you, inspiring you to take bold steps towards your own path of greatness. And guess what? The journey doesn't end here. There's so much more to explore, learn, and achieve. So if you're hungry for more insights, more inspiration, and more strategies to fuel your personal and professional greatness, get ready, because the next episode is just around the corner. Every Tuesday, to be precise, where we'll continue to unravel the secrets to unlocking your extraordinary potential. Don't miss out on the chance to keep rising and thriving with us. Hit the subscribe button and you'll be the first to know when a new episode drops. And remember, greatness is not a destination, it's a continuous journey, so let's embark on it together. Thank you so much for being part of the Rise and Thrive community. It means so much to me that you're listening. And my wish for you is that you get so much out of doing so. Keep reaching for the stars, keep pushing your boundaries, and keep embracing the challenges that come your way, because that's how we truly grow. Stay tuned, stay motivated, and get ready to rise and thrive. If you're finding value from our conversations, don't forget to share this podcast with your friends, family, and colleagues. Together we can create a ripple effect of positivity, optimism, and positive change. Keep shining brightly. Your greatness knows no bounds. And remember, be great and stay awesome.